their time starts so that there's not too much extra stress. All right, so officially for the recording, hi everybody, welcome to the BSA Housing Committee 20 slides, 20 seconds per slide, fun presentation event. Oh, you got it, great. And so we are here today with 6 wonderful presentations that are going to take us through the world of architecture and many more topics and back. And so without further ado, we'll jump right in. And Greg, you're going to be just a touch of a guinea pig to make sure this timer is working. So when your show is over, you'll have the applause to come down off the stage. So Greg and Ganesh, how do you do the spotlight? Do you have to change that each time?
You click on the 3 dots and say spotlight. He's
beautiful.
Spotlit right now, I guess.
Spotlit. Greg, take it away.
Okay, so thank you for having me. I'm going to talk about the Japanese American internment camp called Amache, which is southeast Colorado, during World War II, and it was open from 1942 to 1946.
We're going to see if it works. It's not showing me the timer correctly.
Okay. Do you want to just...
Let me try your next slide.
Okay. So this is my background, Gregory Zuckerman. I work with Ganesh at DCAM as a statewide accessibility initiative planner and intern. I did my undergrad at University of Denver in International Studies. And I'm currently getting my master's of landscape architecture from the Boston Architectural College. Oh, there it goes. All right, so to give you a little background, this is a map that shows where the Japanese Americans were moved from to the 10 internment camps throughout the United States after Pearl Harbor. Amache is highlighted. They came from San Francisco and Los Angeles and outside there. They were all amazing agriculturalists, which really changed how they participated in the internment camps and connected with the people outside of the internment camps in the towns that were local. Sarah, do you want me to hold off?
This is your time, as long as the timer is functioning. Seems to be. That's the fun of it.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, it was just more than 20 seconds. So okay, so yeah. It's just no worries.
Pause, refresh. What if I'm gonna try this one more time. Sorry, no, we want the timer to work for you. It seems to be going. So I'm gonna give you a 20-second extra, sorry.
Yeah. So there were 10 camps around the country, and all of them were about 10,000 to 25,000, I believe. People, except for Amache, which was the smallest one, which was 7,500 people. Here's a map that shows the relationship between the town of Grenada and Amache, which was less than a mile. And that really played into the relationship of the internees to the people who were the guards and lived in the town and the local farms. Changes. Doesn't. Do you want to hit next, maybe?
Yes.
Okay.
Don't know why this is not working.
All right, so awesome. So basically the site was a mile by a mile. So a square mile for the internment camp. It was broken into different blocks. And within each block, there were barracks that were broken into 8 different rooms that families would be in. Oh, now it's moving quick. Sorry, Sarah, is that just me? Because it just went like super fast through a couple slides.
It did it correctly, and then I also hit the button at the exact same second because I was worried it wasn't working. And okay. So now we got you.
Yeah, so this is what it looked like when they first arrived. The Army had completely bulldozed the site and built these tar paper tin roof barracks where families had a 20 by 20 room. And that's really important to think about. And we'll come back to this picture after. So after the war, basically there was zero preservation until John Hopper, who was a high school teacher in 1983, I believe, decided there's a real opportunity to teach his high school students how to preserve this site. And so the site as a whole became their preservation. And then in 2005 to 2008, Bonnie Clark at the University of Denver petitioned to start a field school there. And that's how I got involved. So year one, we basically had minimal resources. We were doing measurements by hand, we were surveying by hand, and we really didn't know what we were getting into. And I'm not an anthropologist, and Bonnie and I became friends during school, and she invited me to come do this. That's actually surprisingly me, the one that's standing. And it was a really unbelievable experience for me, and probably one of the greatest learning experiences that I've had, and really shaped my professional career. All right, so we're back to this photo. So as you saw, basically there is no vegetation, which means there's no root or roots that to hold down the soil. So it was basically sand. And so these barracks made out of tar paper were extremely hot during the summer, extremely cold during the winter, and the wind would sweep right through them and kick up all the sand and make these dust storms because you're on the edge of the Dust Bowl that had ended 4 years prior. What we ended up finding were these amazing gardens. So within 3 years, the Japanese American internees ended up creating these traditional Japanese gardens out of nothing. They basically changed the complete makeup of the soil and built these water systems through irrigation and planted species that literally should not grow anywhere in Southeast Colorado. The other part of Amache that people don't talk about is all the internees in the United States were not optioned to be in the draft. They're technically incarcerated, but they had the option to volunteer. And Amache had the largest percentage of people that were participated in what's called the 442nd Battalion, which is the most decorated battalion in the US Army. So the beauty of Amache is normally when you're doing research, you collect it, you analyze, you discuss, you preserve. But with this, we could discuss with people that were still alive that had participated in Amache, and that made a big difference. So I'm not an anthropologist or an archaeologist. So why did I participate in this, and why do I continue to participate in this? Well, that's simply because it taught me the importance of ethics in storytelling. And showed me that there is a link between anthropology, archaeology, architecture, and also branding and marketing. So at this point, you can start to see some of the gardens we dug up. They took old slabs of concrete and cut them a specific way to make them look like basalt. And on the site, you can see all of this. And obviously we dug it up. So one of the most important things that really affected me is on the left, you have a descendant and his grandmother. On the right, you have a high school student and Carlene, who's one of my best friends in the world now, who's 84 or 83 and comes every year. And the beauty of it at the end of the day is the amount of people that we've gotten to participate in this. So we have students from Harvard, University of Maryland, UCLA. We have a taxonomist from the trustees who identifies plants for us because it's crazy, the plants we find. And the most important thing is in the past year, Bonnie's work made Amache on the map, and it became a national park. And my last slide is a bunch of additional information if anybody's interested of Amache, what's going on in Amache. There's a documentary that the Denver Botanical Gardens made for us. There is, multiple podcasts. Bonnie did a TED Talk. So anyways, thank you.
Thank you, Greg. I am going to pause us briefly. Sorry, Keely, because we're having some technical difficulties. Some of these slides are working and some are not. So Keely, I'm going to get you a couple extra seconds while I putz with the slides. Please go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hello, everyone. My name is Keely Moore, and I'm an architect and urban designer at Studio G Architects. And my project that I'm going to show is way different, and I have a lot of questions. So that's why I like these events, because they're so varied in all the content that's shared, which is really makes it fun.
We're going to hope for the best, Keely.
All right.
You good?
Yep. All right. So we have two projects that I'm going to talk about today. One on the left is called E+ Highland, and it is in Roxbury. And the one on the right is in Dorchester, and we call it 37 Wales. They are both affordable, both multifamily, both designed to passive house, and one is going to be a passive house, the one on the left. And the city said, they're both the same size, they're both the same. Can't you just make all the systems the same? And we're like, nope. So I'm going to show you why we can't do all the systems the same. So E+ Highland is the first ILFI affordable housing pilot program project in the Northeast, which is exciting. It will be energy positive. That's why the E+ stands for energy positive. And it's through the city of Boston. So 37 Wales is in Dorchester, and it actually is the client is Heading Home, and they are an organization that houses formerly homeless folks. So this one also has a supportive housing component to it, and is on a very tight urban lot, and it consists of 2 and 3 bedrooms. So the city of Boston and the state of Massachusetts really have done us a lot of favors lately as designers, because they're really holding our feet to the fire on performance. And we can't get away with it. And the developers can't get away with doing anything less. So it's really exciting that we have all these new regulations that really challenge us to be better designers. And so the key thing about starting a project is if it's rental or condo. And that simple question actually really defines the whole rest of your mechanical systems for the project. So it's kind of a fascinating thing to think about, like how the building is set up and how that trickles down to the rest of the decisions that you make for the project. So for example, central systems are a huge benefit, because if you have a solar panel array on the top, that can feed the house meter, and the house meter can take bigger loads, which are central systems, but they do take more space. And there's more burden on the owner for having all the operating costs. With dedicated systems, this is where the pieces are broken up within the building, and you need more little spaces within each unit and more space outside. But they're not as good for solar panels because there's not a huge meter to offset. So there's pros and cons with each. There is a new people in the area are doing open source specs for Passive House to make it easier to design and get it into your specs. And the firm that we worked with for engineering, Nori and Siani, they did a really cool questionnaire where they asked us like 60 different questions on every single thing they could think about. And that was a really good organizing tool. So in terms of other tools we've used Woofy for the energy modeling and tracking all the energy use that the building does. And for detailing insulation, we're like, how much insulation do we really need here? Well, we can test it in Therm. So this is another Woofy graphic. And the key thing here is the first 4 little bars you see, that is all the systems in the envelope. Those are tiny. The big ones are the appliances, the lighting, and the miscellaneous plug loads. those are the huge pieces that we need to offset. The green bar is the renewables. So in our example here, we are doing better. So basic passive house information, you need to site it right so it has the right light. High performance windows can make you actually have a smaller mechanical system. High insulation means you're not going to have huge temperature swings. Balanced ventilation means healthier interiors. And the airtight envelope helps you reduce drafts and save energy, and it's more comfortable. So our wall sections actually are very similar between the two projects. They are very simple 2x6 wood framing with 4 inches of mineral wool on the outside, and one has fiber cement cladding and the other has brick. So it's a nice kind of standard wall size. And to talk a little bit about domestic hot water. So we realized the E+ plan is on the top, and we had room in our plan to have a centralized system. And it was convenient that all of our energy calculations pointed towards less energy used on the central system. Wales, on that very tight little lot, had no space, so we had to break it up. This is, the point where you have to think about all the energy that you're using. So for example, we even talked to the elevator rep, like how much energy is the elevator going to use? So in addition to lighting and plug loads, which you can't really have much control, you really need to think about all the components that go into the building. Here's an image of all of the components that are making up the mechanical systems for E+. We have a combination of, so in this plan, because we had more room, we were able to do cut out little closets to put in vertical fan coil units. And we also have exterior equipment on the side. So this is another zoom in picture on the left of a vertical fan coil that goes into a closet. And in 37 Wales, we had a higher floor to floor ratio, so we could actually fit everything in the ceiling, which is great because we had actually no room in the floor plan. So it was like interesting, thinking about ceiling space versus floor plan space. For the ERV on E+ on the left, we had a room for ERVs for the fresh air for every floor. On 37 Wales, there was no room for mechanical room, so we had individual ERVs above each unit. So okay, so then back to hot water again. This is a diagram of how you have on the top left of how you have an exterior unit and how that feeds into the interior unit in your central hot water system. On on 37 Wales, we just had a little closet for a heat pump water heater. We also wanted to think about solar thermal, like how can we be as efficient as possible? But turns out when you add in all the solar thermal, which is that blue bar at the top, that takes away a whole row of solar panels. And then you have to have a duplicate hot water system. And then you have to have an 800-gallon storage. So sadly, solar thermal didn't work. All right, after all of that, takeaways, we're really happy that the tighter regulations are pushing designers to be better. And this is hard. Like, it's really challenging to get to be energy positive, especially at this scale of building. And the engineers really are relying on the latest technology, which is a little bit scary. Well, you're never going to know why it's scary, I guess.
Thank you, Keely.
Thank you.
Spotlight for Chris. The timer's still rolling, so we're just going to get you that extra few seconds. Take it away.
All right. Thanks for having me. My name is Christopher Peasy. I'm an architect and teacher in San Francisco, so I'm bringing you sort of a West Coast view of things. I'm excited to join, and I'm going to talk about some current threads on the relationship of housing in the city and some metrics of residential development that revolve around houses and how big they are and how we organize them together. And I think overall making the case for a form of development which is low rise, high density. So I think it's something you're all going to be familiar with, but we're going to sort of look at some of the options for urban land development and figure out, why I think this is really the best way to move forward. And it's really the only way you can move forward. My interest and passion for urban housing grows out of 4 parallel interrelated crises: affordable housing, population growth, climate change, and sustainability. And we've finally gotten some leadership from these issues from Washington and even from Rome, of all places. These crises are becoming part of our day-to-day practice as architects and planners. Housing is a central component of cities and city making. It usually takes up about half of the land area in cities. This is David Baker's estimate. He's an architect here in San Francisco who specializes in affordable housing and neighborhood development. Whatever your image of a house is, whether it's something in the single family spectrum, whether it's a duplex like Villa Stein, or whether it sits on a golf course, whatever your idea is, it really needs to be tempered by the modern realities of limited land and escalating resource consumption. In America, we have the biggest houses in the world, and our houses have been growing. Growth stops a little bit with each recession, but then it rebounds super quick. And we have the most space per person in the world. Although only about 25% of all households in the country are actually nuclear families. So most families are kind of different household types. Recently, we've hit a sort of tipping point. We still want bigger houses, but we're okay with smaller yards and smaller lots. And that's really what we can afford, is what's on the left. And we're running out of room for those kind of solutions too. The world's expected to grow by about 1 million people per week for the next 40 years. So that's like 1 San Francisco per week. And land is scarce, and most of the best sites have been taken. All the dry and flat land has already been used. Most of the places in the Bay Area that we're looking at are big former military sites, which are just above sea level. So we can group houses together and live in apartments. And I think you're probably familiar with these unit types. They go about $1,000 a square foot here in San Francisco. And they don't really change that much from Seattle to Boston to Dallas to Denver. So what's the best way to group these? Well, I think most of us group them in bars of housing, 60 to 80 feet wide. We can shape them into urban houses, and we can arrange them into low-rise, high-density perimeter blocks, forming courtyards like Barcelona, or like they still do in Northern Europe, where community aspects of courtyard housing still have traction. In cities that control their own redevelopment land, this form of urbanism is really the choice. It's the consensus choice in places like Malmo and Amsterdam. Towers are not needed, and single-family houses are not really supportable in a 21st century model. The Dutch are so good at urban planning and block making, they've actually kind of invented some different kinds of block types, like the double ring block, which has an inner courtyard. And they also do mixed tenure developments, a combination of ownership projects and rental projects, some aspects that are incredibly challenging to pull off in the United States. And you're seeing a couple examples of those double ring blocks here from the Netherlands. Another form of housing that's historically popular in Holland is the Charityhof, which is made of attached houses surrounding an inner block garden. It's historically been for non-ordered religious women or pensioners or single parents, you know, all the family types that don't really fit in a pro forma, although we're starting to address some of those needs. As a formal type, these are usually 1.5 to 2.5 stories, face into a courtyard with a few openings to the street. And a unit is identified as a window, a door, and a dormer. It gives you identity and being part of a community. But the nice thing is, because it's inner block, the real estate's cheap, since there's no great address and no great view. What is the right form of housing and urbanism now? You know, there are some folks who are advocating for super tall buildings. There are other folks who are saying we shouldn't even be using concrete because it's not really sustainable. Land is so scarce and expensive that most developers only want to deliver the housing types with the highest returns, and those are towns and towers. That's what we call it. When in fact, the greatest demand is for cottages and courtyards. Very small units grouped and stacked around shared, secure open spaces. And really that's kind of the grassroots approach too. And this really kind of fits in with the construction type, construction cost, building code model. It's that central zone that is really supportable and achievable. The really sparse stuff is challenging. The really dense stuff It's just not needed. And the form of housing in neighborhoods is closely related with our approach to open space. In American post-war neighborhoods, open space was usually at the parcel scale. Pre-war neighborhoods, open space was usually at the neighborhood scale, like in Back Bay or in Edinburgh, and the blocks themselves are densely built. In this spectrum, I think in the low-rise, high-density solution is sort of the optimum version with a shared, secure, open space at the center. It's communal, it's green. I think it's big enough. So a shift away from the private open space organization strategy. And here's the state of the art in city design thinking. This is from Jan Gehl's office. David Sim, who's one of the partners there, just wrote this book, Soft City. And here are all the ways that he's advocating for enclosed blocks, all the different ways that they're high performing from a social and environmental perspective. And finally, some current work from my office, Hart Howerton. Here's 5 of our projects that are fitting in this category of low rise, high density. And then because we are hospitality planners, we're also able to locate these in great locations as best we can. So thanks for your time.
Thank you, Chris. Questions for Chris, please. Save for the end, spotlight, Miriam. Please
Amazing. Thanks, Sarah. Thank you, BSA Housing Committee folks. My name is Miriam G. I am an architect and co-founder at CoEverything. I'm a community champion, an optimist, and a get shit done kind of gal. I'm here to present to you about the first ever community-owned, crowd-funded project of an affordable housing right here in Fields Corner where I'm sitting. So surprise, as many of you may know, the housing system is broken. What are we up against? Let's start with an entire nation founded on stolen land, displacement of Native peoples, enslaved folks, and stolen labor. How does that result in a great housing market like this in Boston? Well, redlining and high prices mean you can afford something like a mortgage on a great home, and then developers are only challenged to check the box and move on to their inclusive community engagement processes. So from the spectrum of community ownership to community engagement, a group of folks got together and we thought, I think that we can do better than this. Some of them are on this call. Shout out to Samala and Dariella and Marty and David and Jackie and Travis and Declan and Lizette and Sharon and many, many other people. So a group of Dorchester neighbors decided that we were going to try to take this new offering, Reg CF, for crowdfunding to give real neighbors in Dorchester access to ownership and of an affordable housing project. So using a platform, we would be able to sell shares of at minimum $500 to offer a return and an equity position in a real project that was already under permitting. We were like, all right, we have no idea. We hope we get 30 people. We hope we get $50,000. We don't know, but from enough of what we've heard, there's value in this. Let's try this. People want to be a part of something. People want to own, and they don't want to just be a renter. So it did take a village, and it will continue to take a village. We created a process with our community partners like Boston Ujima Project, Union Capital Boston, and all of the community advisors that I mentioned before. We also thought it's going to be more than just teaching people or telling people that there's this option and availability to, in an alternative way, invest and own in an affordable housing project. So we created an entire Real Estate for All YouTube series. And if you want to sign up, you can just check it out. RE for All YouTube, the bit.ly link is below, where it just explains in plain speak, using voices and characters from folks in our neighborhood, what it's like to financially own a multifamily home and why it's so important to have income restricted housing in the city. So we had to get started on a big campaign. In order to put your offering out on small change, you don't just magically get people logging in and purchasing shares and buying into your program. You had to make a video. We went around to all of the Fields Corner Civic WOW Coalition, neighborhood associations, and we were like, hear ye, BIPOC Dorchester neighbors. Do you want to learn how you can invest in real estate in your neighborhood? If so, come on, check us out. And so a lot of this was by word of mouth. It was by building trust in community and advertising to the people who were longtime residents, renters, first-time home buyers, and we focused our attention and we did it. We raised $142,500 with 81 individuals owning $500 to maybe $2,000 in the project. And this is the first time that we know of that any income restricted project, these 29 units of affordable housing with retail, have been crowdfunded alongside the developer. So Thiele Development holds the risk and guarantee, and we were able to invite anybody from the neighborhood who was over the age of 18, and you didn't have to have $1 million to invest. And so we arrived at this position where we're like, we own this. This is really cool, right? Great, we're gonna make 6% preferred returns. And then in 7 years, a 20% bonus when it gets sold back to us. But we were like, we can do more than that. Let's move into some democratic governance models that we've learned about from projects like Boston Ujima. And so we were like, now what? What does that mean? Well, all of the crowdfund investors are able to elect, no matter how much they invested, whether it was 500 or 5,000, 3 seats to the project oversight committee. And with the developer and then also 3 residents, once it's rented up and completed, they'll be able to make some decisions about what they want to do with this building. So there was going to be nominations, there's going to be elections, and then people will be able to actually participate in this thing that they own that is valuable and feel ownership over it, whether you own a little piece or a lot, you own that piece of the rock and you walk by every week. So we just had a wonderful, wonderful experience where 10 people nominated themselves for these 3 seats, all local folks who live in the area. And we went through the election process online and people wrote up their bios and 3 folks were elected, Marilyn, Judy and Lorenzo and Shaquille. And we got to making our first decision. How are we going to choose the retail tenant for the ground floor? So we started by having this big community listening session where all neighbors were invited who live nearby. It was a hybrid event and we were hearing pitches from 2 potential candidates, the Bookshop and Rain Drink Lab. And everybody's really excited to have their voice heard and to ask direct questions to the business owners. This is way beyond checking the box. So at this live event, which Samala and Dariela so gracefully hosted, people really showed up. They were into it. They were asking some hard questions to these business owners. And these are small local businesses that we're really excited to support. Both the overwhelming support that we heard from the community listening session and the due diligence and scoring and financial vetting that was done with the project oversight committee, we were very excited to announce that we are bringing this first independent hybrid nonprofit bookshop to Fields Corner. Woo. And you will be able to check it out if you can get beyond the paywall to see the article in the Boston Globe. And so now we own this together, me, Samala, Marty, Jackie, and like 50 other people who are in the Boston area, a total of 80 people, including folks who've done this worldwide, nationwide. And we're like, why not? Why can't we also benefit from affordable housing that's in our neighborhood? Isn't this a better way and a new way to do development with and for community? You don't just have to own it. You don't just have to rent it. Maybe you could rent and own it. That's all I have for you today. Advocate for alternative ownership methods. Architects, get out there. We can do better. That's all.
Oh, perfect. And you know, the timer just stopped right on you here. Thank you, Miriam. All right, next up, we're going to Spotlight Ganesh. Spotlight. Please take it away.
Thank you, Sarah. Good evening, everyone. I'm Ganesh Ramachandran, Deputy Director of Planning at DCAM. We are responsible for over 65 million square feet of state property, but we don't have much of a housing portfolio. So that makes this project a bit unique. And not only that, we had to done in like warp speed by state standards. When you work for the state, it takes at least a dozen people in different departments to say yes to a maybe decision. And I only say it half jokingly. So it is a challenge to like get these things done fast. In terms, we literally had to like put this together in about 3 months. That doesn't include the early planning stage, which is about like a month and a half. So we started construction starting of winter, and we had the benefit of an extraordinary team. Because of emergency authorization, we could get them procured on record time. And not only they were highly qualified, but they also believe in the mission and the importance of this project. And this project is an outcome of the public health crises that we are still living, and I'm not even talking about COVID. On any day in 2020, there are close to 18,000 people in Massachusetts who experience homelessness. And among those, 1 in 4 deaths are attributed to drug overdoses. And those numbers have been increasing at an alarming pace. And that leads us to Mass and Cass. For those of you who live in Boston area, this needs no introduction. Any day there are 300 to 400 individuals battling addiction, loss of housing there. And there needs to be multiple solutions for this. And the project I'm going to talk about is just one such solution based on the Housing First approach, which prioritizes permanent housing to people experiencing homelessness. And the goal here was to provide transitional housing in a non-congregate setting. So not as a shelter, but where individual personal space, which are climate controlled and also supported by clinicians and social workers. The site is about 20 minutes walk from the Jamaica Plain, Forest Hills T, like adjacent to Franklin Park. It's walkable from the train station, but there's also a shuttle that goes about 15 to 20 minutes from the train station and back from the hospital. The site does not have any immediate neighbors, so that was actually a plus here, so we could limit the political opposition. The state has also been considering this as a public health campus, and there's been planning that's going on for the last 4 years. So we were able to outreach to those in the steering committee and community leaders, and we were able to get their support. And one of the primary goals was we didn't want to lose sight that we wanted to create a community to the extent possible, where the residents can support each other and heal together, where they can be safe, not worry about their stuff getting stolen or being mugged, or a place where they can have access to basic health care and counseling. In terms of the project program, we had about 17 shelters and 21 beds. Some of the larger boxes can support a couple. There's a 400 square foot community room, a nurse's station, on-site laundry, common bathrooms, and a 24-hour security presence. I mean, these are tiny, about 8 feet by 8 feet, but they do have like fire alarm, smoke alarm. They have a bed, a table, and they have heat during winter. And these photos were taken like upon completion during the spring of 2022. We may be the state, but we still had to go through extensive, code approval process. We had to get variances from the Board of Building Regulation and Standards, the Plumbing Board. We had to satisfy the state and city fire marshals, the Boston Water and Sewer Commission, and of course the state building inspector. And that takes time. In terms of infrastructure, like most projects, parking was an issue. It was a functioning hospital site, and we were building on the parking lot. So we actually had to accommodate the parking spaces that were lost, that are going to be lost, before we could even get started. And that involved trenching, digging holes in a hospital that's functioning, and connecting sewer, water, power. All of those added to the cost, and I will talk about that at the end of this slide. And in terms of architectural coordination, we the shelters were provided by this company called Pallet, based in Seattle. Most of their completed projects were located in areas with milder winters in LA, maybe 1 or 2 in Colorado, but not compared to the winters we hit here in Northeast. So we have to come up with solutions that make sure the pipes don't freeze in our sub-zero temperatures. And the design construction with the general contractor was it's like a day-to-day thing. Every day we used to have check-in meetings every day, and the panels were shipped from Washington, DC. There was a snowstorm in Idaho, and we couldn't get them for 2 weeks. So they were just and we had to change the schedule. So it was a situation that changed one day after the other. For placemaking, we worked with a national nonprofit called Artlifting that was actually started in Boston. They license artwork by artists impacted by housing insecurity and disabilities. So we identified artists who are local. Their artwork was printed on large aluminum panels and installed on the side facade of the cottages. We also work with a local mural artist, Benjamin Danian, to help animate the ground plane. You don't see that in these photos. And we also work with these community members to help with the landscaping and create a modest form of community garden within there. And how much did it cost? I mean, this was not cheap. I mean, we were able to build it fast, like 90 days. It's definitely a record by state standards. But the cost of each shelter was, came to about close to $180,000. But the cost that the pallet we're selling was only like 7,000 to 10,000. But the moment you add all other costs, it all adds up. And I will wrap with one of the resident Danny's quote, that I'm trying to focus on getting my home taken care of, getting into a routine, getting my life together. It beats sleeping on cardboard. This place changed my life. Thank you.
Perfect timing, Ganesh. Thank you so much. And highlight Alec.
Oh my God, everybody is so cool. Everybody is so cool. I'm enthralled by all of your work. My name is Alec Marquez. I'm a second-year student in urban planning at the Graduate School of Design at Harvard. And this is a little snippet of my thesis work so far. And it's very, very early. So today I want to talk about indigenous land use planning using solidarity economics in the capitalist scene, which is a very intentional word choice. And I would love to tell you more about Chitkaran cities, but I don't think I have the time. But it's a fungus, and it's a very cool fungus. It's very important for the Anishinaabe people. Of course, I want to start with the land acknowledgements. Today, I talked to you from the land of the Massachusetts, the Pawtuckets and Naumkeag, and I'd like to greet you in the tongue of my ancestors, the Kwawitekans, Yanawe Nenayo, Iasawe Nayo. Be grateful for all of our non-human family and friends that maybe made our days a little bit better today. Of course, nothing is more important in our generation than climate change. Of course, you see all of these biblically apocalyptic frames that I'm sure you're all familiar with, whether that's the burning of the Amazon or the melting of the ice caps. On the far left is actually my homeland of the Rio Grande, which went dry for the first time in a half a century this past year. Typically, people call what we live in right now the Anthropocene, which means it's a time changed by human beings, but I think that's a bit of a misnomer. I like to refer to this period as the Capitalocene. The Capitalocene is a geopoetics for making sense of capitalism as a world ecology of power and reproduction. Humans have been around, at least indigenous people, we know that they've been in civilized situations for about 15,000 years, civilized. And as you can see, things were pretty chill for a lot of that time. And then something happened in the late 1600s. I don't know what, but it really changed the way that we produce greenhouse gases globally. So let's move back to that point in time. What were we doing? Well, a lot of indigenous folks had particular relationships with the land that were very eco-theological. I'll take Chief Oren Lyons quotes in saying, the absence of the sacred, nothing is sacred, everything is for sale. We need to go back to these spiritual laws if we are to survive. Taking some stuff out of Braiding Sweetgrass, if you haven't read, fantastic. In this passage, she talks about during the treaties that were signed by the indigenous groups as America became a nation state. America said, hey, you can assimilate, but you got to give up communal land ownership. You have to agree to private property. And they did, and we all know how that went. So are there any ways that we can have property communally so that we can integrate indigenous perspectives on land to a system that pressures them to commodify and to privatize? Well, yes, there is. Solidarity economics asserts that if we can skirt around capitalist economic systems and create different things, it might work out. So here's some cases of that happening. On the far left, we have Evo Morales, who passed a law of rights of Mother Earth in Bolivia, giving legal statute to the land. We have the Zapatistas in Chiapas and the revolutionary agrarian law. Of course, we have Standing Rock, which was a very much solidarity economic fight. The Thunder Valley CDC out of Dakota is run by the Lakota people, creating housing and schooling and food systems. The Segoria Land Trust in the East Bay is actually in conversations with the city about getting land back. And the Weelaunee Forest is an electric fight that is happening in the wild forests of Atlanta right now. Oh my God, monsters. On the left, we have a creature that was very important to the Anishinaabe people. This is the Wendigo. And the Wendigo is described as something that you become if you begin to take more than you need. You become a Wendigo. Here's a quote from Braiding Sweetgrass again, as she goes into a mall trying to be the way she is when she goes into a forest looking for plant medicine. She says, this was making a mockery of the honorable harvest. It's so obvious. I was looking for life behind the products, but I couldn't find them because there are no lives here. Everything for sale is dead. And that could be taken out of Marx's Capital when he writes, capital is dead labor, which, vampire-like, lives only by sucking living labor and lives the more labor it sucks. So the Wendigo and the vampire and these very poetic descriptions of the system that we abide by kind of maybe points us in a better direction. So as we conceive it now, the way we think about developments, whether that's housing or otherwise, we think that these are the stakeholders. But if we were to take a page out of the book of Indigenous Ecotheology, these stakeholders might look a little bit more like this. I thought I really was going to time that right, but here it is. What would it mean to include water in these conversations and to include the fire in these conversations, the plants and the animals that make their habitats in the world that we all share? What would that look like in a world where we pretend that these things are inanimate things that are subservient to our needs? I want to take a case study. This is the River Ida. In this river, before this photo was taken, it was going dry, and an architectural firm was hired to try to rehabilitate it. And what they did before was they created these lattice structures, which you can see the remnants of, and it was all sort of stone before the grass began to grow in. And they saw which paths the water took, and only then reinvested in where to place a lot of the design. So they listened to the water. They found out where the water wanted to flow. This is Paradise, a city that burnt completely to the ground overnight. And I think about 100,000 people became migrants. A lot of them, or refugees rather, resettled in Chico, California. And a group called the Traditional Ecological Knowledge Collective has been taking these members and helping these refugees from Paradise and helping them reconnect with fires in a healthy and harmless way, healing some of that trauma. So what does housing inspired by indigenous practices and beliefs look like in the capitalist scene? What would it look like to cease federal subsidies to houses that are built well in flood zones on the coast? What would it be like to listen to the places that fire wants to have back, or places where water doesn't run naturally? I don't know, but I intend to find out. Nalatem, thank you very much for your time.
I'm giving you the air. Oh, and it didn't, the slides. Thank you, Alec. This is very wonderful. Here we go. The applause here awarded. Sorry for some of the technical glitches. I thank you, everybody. This has been really eye-opening. I feel like I have so many questions and just so many wonderful thoughts happening here. It really makes me thankful to be part of the housing committee so that we can talk about some of this stuff. I'm just going to stop sharing. And I think we can pause recording so that we can just do some questions and answers. Or what do you think, Ganesh? Should we keep the recording part of the follow-up?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, wonderful. Folks, please feel free. We're going to be very informal here. Come off mute and on to video. And if anyone has questions, please feel free to break the ice here. Keely, I know you had a few.
Yeah, Greg, I was wondering, you said that site was turned into a national park.
Mhm.
Is there, does that mean it includes like more interpretive signage, or like you can visit the garden? How's that work?
2021 it got passed through the House, and then this past March it got passed through the Senate, and then Biden signed it off in April, I believe, March. And so funding is going to come in. So it takes about 5 years for a full process for the federal government to kind of take over land and deal with that. And so, again, I'm lucky enough that I am on the Imaje preservation board that I will be able to have a little bit of input, which is, a dream come true, right? I grew up watching Indiana Jones, and now here I am, right? But it's just working through with the Department of Interior on how and what they want to show. Because the site's very different than a place like Manzanar, which is probably the most well-known Japanese American internment camp. And our site in particular, because of the agricultural knowledge of the people that were there, like downed trees end up becoming artifacts, right? And so the national parks, when they came, they're like, we got to clear out these downed trees so nobody falls, whatever. And we're like, whoa, this is something we've identified as a correlation between who's there or who was in these blocks versus who are in these other blocks and how they adapted to life on site. And so it's really this interesting working relationship between Department of Interior, the people of Grenada, that small little town of 400 people that have a bank, a liquor store, and a restaurant, and that's it. And then the University of Denver. So it's definitely interesting. Talk about stakeholders.
I have another question if nobody else has a question. Ganesh, I was curious, do you think going through that whole process, if you do it again, can you do it faster and cheaper? Like, did you pave the way to make it better?
No, I think if we were to do it again, we would strongly recommend against going this fast, because speed is good, but like rushing through it, you make compromises and you kind of pay it off as like dollars. So three months, definitely is not a good, even we didn't have to acquire land, it's a state-owned property, we didn't have to do zoning, but everything takes time. And when you rush these things, timing is important. Like, they were really trying to get the people in there, which we appreciate, but which also meant we had to like build have some people and then like build in the second part. And that was really like challenging because the union laborers don't want to deal with like needles there. And like, there was a lot of trying to be negotiators between like the contractor and the clinical workers who just couldn't understand why like someone has such a problem just entering something and like spending 10 minutes when there's nobody in there. So we had to get like temporary trailers to accommodate the residents. There was no permanent power, so the whole thing was on generator for the first like 3 months. And then we had to like connect to the hospital, so which means the hospital has to like shut down for like 6 to 8 hours power while we were connected. So there are all these things you don't really anticipate, we just come up. Not that you're going to solve everything if it becomes a 6-month project, but it'll give us a little bit more space. Like, it was a all hands on the deck effort, but it's also not sustainable for the mental health of the team that's working. You can do 1 or 2 of these projects, but it's just, and you can actually save money by like planning a little bit ahead.
Thank you.
I have a follow-up question, Ganesh, just because the first memo I ever wrote you was about transition housing, section 7 versus section 8. Like, how did the whole, obviously because of the situation, certain zoning was not included, or you didn't have to.
No zoning. We didn't have to like, but we had to get like, the fire marshal and all those sign off. But it's a state property, it's considered temporary. These shelters, they anticipated life is about 10 years. That's what they claim.
Gotcha.
We don't really know. But we didn't have to go through any zoning.
Oh, okay. That's pretty awesome. On your video on the website, it talks about how the buildings will be gone in 10 years, but the plumbing and the electrical work will be there for 30 or something like that.
Nice.
Which, yeah.
It'll be there for 100 years because
Yeah.
I just want to commend everyone for your incredible presentations, and my mind is spinning right now. I love that the topic is housing, and we had such an incredibly like wide, diverse kind of breadth of presentations, and just the fact that Ganesh and Greg are talking about zoning and construction timelines, but we ended with Alec talking about Indigenous people and self-sufficiency and building their houses when zoning didn't even exist. It's just a lot to think about, and thank you all.
Yeah, thank you for the comment, Haley. I feel like I wanted to draw, I feel like there's been a lot of, although it was very diverse, almost a kind of undercurrent of thinking about how are we going to solve this really big issue we have, right? Housing, humanity, coexisting on our planet, basically, if I could just summarize all the big issues. I'm sort of formulating, I wonder, Christopher and Miriam, like, is there something where, where we start to talk about what the right scale is, and then we start to talk about what the right kind of ownership model is there somewhere these things kind of have this beautiful sweet spot where we start to build these like mini black courtyard kind of semi-urban places but the people who live there own this, and how do we start to advocate for that? I'm curious, or what your thoughts, if that's even the right approach.
Well, I think a lot of the kind of shared approaches and common approaches are underway in quite a few places in the world, and probably America is slow to catch up. So much of the configuration of housing is tied to transit, which we're not great at. There's probably only a half a dozen cities in America that you can successfully live without a car, including Boston and San Francisco, but even those, it's pretty limited parts too. I think I want to also echo one of Haley's comments, which is the breadth of the presentations. And what I found really interesting is how almost everyone was talking about things that are kind of on the outside of mainstream practice. Like, Kylie, knowing the sustainability engineering better than her engineers do and how to interpret the codes, and Ganesh sort of implementing a really precise affordable housing strategy, and Miriam trying to figure out how to actually develop and fund and operate a housing project. It makes me wonder if, maybe my view of mainstream practice is too narrow, or if, are the schools now, is the academy training everyone for these half dozen really broad approaches to how to be, how to exist as a designer after school, or is everyone learning on the fly, and how much longer do we do that?
I'm curious to poll the audience real quick before we get to hands raised. Just with a head shake or a nod, did you learn this in school?
Little bits, but
That's good. Awesome. No, that's great points. Thank you. I see Ganesh raised your hand, and then Greg.
I just want to make a comment, we are all architects and planners here, but I feel like the real solution or the primary solution is kind of political here, because we may all come up with amazing ideas, but we all live in towns and cities where people don't want affordable housing. I mean, because personal wealth is so much pegged to your property value, which Miriam, you are trying to challenge and contest. It is really challenging to to do anything. And I think there has to be a much more vocal, you are seeing more YIMBYs and all that stuff, but it's still a drop in the bucket, because we all have to change our zoning codes and all that. Otherwise, I don't see, we can have thousands of these shadow cottages or any of these projects, but they'll still be drop in the bucket.
Yeah, thank you. Greg.
So Ganesh stole the words out of my mouth. I think you're 100% right that it ends up becoming a political thing, right? And a socio-cultural issue, especially in the United States. Like you look at Europe, right? And it's like there's the understanding of communal value. But here, especially in suburbia, there isn't even close to that concept, right? It's like I own my quarter acre and that's what I'm investing in. And then I'm investing in my kid's school and that's it, right? And the parks just are increasing my own value. And I think that's really where it starts to become a major issue. Because you go to other countries and, obviously I lived in Spain, I've lived in Colombia, we've placed in Uruguay, and it's just very different as far as, hey, we can communally grow. And I think that's something that, I think your presentation was great on San Francisco and how to divide things up, but it's like, how accommodating are people in San Francisco specifically of shrinking their yards to add some communal play? Like, to me, one of my good friends from Amache was the curator of the Japanese gardens at Lotus Land in Santa Barbara. And he does a lot of work up in San Francisco. And he's just like, every principle of Japanese garden is gone in San Francisco because it's about everybody's individual plot. It doesn't, like, it's stuck within that, whatever, 1,800 square feet. And it doesn't, pass along to the other neighbors. And he's like, we're done working there because it doesn't hold in the concepts that Japanese gardening really, wish to prescribe to.
So you asked where the open spaces should be or where the affordable housing should be.
Yeah.
San Francisco alone could use 50,000 Shattuck cottages, but
yeah,
we also have, homeowners who will write any amount of any check for the affordable housing to be somewhere else, so.
Yeah, we just had a Toll Brother complex of 150 houses built down the street from us. And because people refused to allow low-income housing to go there, and it is an absolute disaster. Like, basically my entire street floods every time it rains because it was about profit for them. And, there's not this whole thing. It doesn't add anything to the community. It takes away. And I think it's, I think it's really important to have those discussions. So.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for your comments, Greg. Alec.
Yeah, just wanted to kind of go back to what a lot of people were raising. But one thing, as somebody who's a student right now in a planning and architecture school, there's the Joint Center for Housing that is housed in Harvard. We had the director come speak to us the other day, and one point of the conversation was about home ownership as a means to close the racial wealth gap, or it's when we talk about any sort of movement towards decommodification of housing, that tends to be the knee-jerk reaction. And I'm willing to bet that not all of it is in good faith, right? But any conversation around, hey, maybe housing doesn't need to be a commodity, maybe it doesn't need to be a speculative asset. Any conversation around how that might be better. And one of my favorite stories about this is when this was first proposed in Vermont, the then mayor of Burlington was like, no, that seems like a really bad idea, specifically for that reason. Ultimately did it anyway. Now Burlington has the biggest community land trust in the country, and has very much helped people to get housing. Of course, that mayor was Bernie Sanders and went on to champion a whole bunch of other progressive policies, but there's always, we're kind of locked in combat there in pedagogy. But the prevailing thing that we're taught is housing should be a commodity. It should always be a speculative thing. Of course, when you look at parts of the world that have figured this out, I think mostly Vienna in Austria, 80% of their population lives in housing that is run by the municipal government. And everybody is very content. It's beautiful public housing. It's not, it's no Pruitt-Igoe, right? There's daycares on the bottom and swimming pools and restaurants, all cooperatively owned. So all this to say that this whole NIMBY problem that we're dealing with, you know, I keep referring to it as the Wendigo inside of us coming out, because if you're, like somebody very astutely mentioned, if you're especially in such a precarious economy where something like the majority of Americans are one missed paycheck away from poverty, if all of your wealth is held in this one asset, no matter what, no matter if you're going to give affordable housing to the best kinds of people in the city, if there's any chance of decreasing the value of that asset, it makes you, it schisms, it puts a schism in people between wanting the best for the community, but also that fear of I'm very vulnerable and I don't. And so I try to lend a lot of empathy. It's not really any person being a bad person. It's the system that pushes people to think in a way that isn't so productive.
Yeah, coming full circle to politics, Miriam.
I think we're at the point now, like, I totally recognize I would love to live in the post-capitalist economy and like be in solidarity with everybody and like be like yimbies, nimbies, whatever. Let's, you know, everybody has housing. Housing's decommodified. We don't have to worry about it. We got each other. We got plenty. We have a lot. We have enough. And then at the same time, I'm like, I don't personally have the energy to do the policy work. I'm like, all right, so why don't we just take on every little thing that we can try. And even if you just, you know, Ganesh is doing a project, Keely's doing, everybody's doing a little thing at a time, and you start layering them all together. You just do as much as you can. Maybe we're not going to change the systems overnight without getting into politics, but it's like, can you kind of, you know, you do this like, you know, like sneaky spy stuff. You doing a little sneaky spy stuff to make everything a little bit better. It's like maybe the next crowdfunded project will be, you know, a cool donut, and it'll be on a community land trust. And we're going to have a board member who's going to be animals, fire, water, everything. It's going to be great, you know, and you just scan them all in there and just give it a shot. And then Dariel is going to be the developer.
Thank you. No, I love that. I think I also would add, you know, I hope that with enough visibility to enough of those projects, there's going to be drips and drabs of models that can start to be replicated. And, you know, the project on .av, I'm excited to see, because now there's physical, you know, bricks and mortar, not brick though, but in the world where people can start to ask, how did this happen? How did you become an owner? When is the next one happening that I can be a part of? And it starts to kind of build that momentum. Greg, you've got your hand up again.
Yeah, sorry for putting my hand up so much, but I think, you know, I think your example of community housing, right, and pooling money is awesome, and it's happening in places like Dumbo, Brooklyn, right? My cousin was part of a group that pooled money together, bought an apartment building, and they're all artists and do whatever. And I think that is really the next step, which I applaud you for recognizing and doing within your own work, because it doesn't make people uncomfortable. And as much as I love to make people uncomfortable, I think it's really important to gain traction and support from the people outside of the thought process that we normally have. Hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah.
And to, you know, Alec, I completely agree with what you're saying. And you know, and I think it just ends up becoming this socio-cultural and socioeconomic situation that holds us back. And I think in our current generation and social situation, everybody's looking for things to change really quickly, right? And really fast, and, you know, give me what I deserve. But the only way to do that is through a process of slow change, so the entire culture changes, right? You can change economic really quickly, but culture takes a very long time to adjust. And I think that's really important to think about.
Yeah, thanks for that. Marty, you have your hand up.
I'm on mute. Here we go. I what did I want to? Oh, I wanted to ask Alec. I think I may have missed it, but what's the stage of your work? Is there a project we can follow? Or are you an academic? I'd missed that, but I'd love to follow along. I fully believe in your vision, and I want to get there. And also, I want to believe both things to be true, that we can work on revolution and attempt some of these small changes, as Miriam suggests, because that's part of educating and casting vision and getting folks to come on board with the consciousness that we need to see revolutionary change. But I just want to follow what you're doing and see how I can participate in my own way in that.
I unfortunately am a lowly peasant grad student working on a thesis, and underfed and underslept and living in a closet kind of a thing. And it's very early in the process. So this week I submit the proposal and I get the stamp of approval but I am a highly regarded human being, I am told in the chat. So I just presented this past Friday. It seemed like it got the green light from the university, and I intend to really, here's my secret plan, and to kind of go into a little bit more detail, is if you've never seen the ProPublica climate maps that kind of go over the next 100 years of climate change in the United States, according to the levels at which we get, according to the IPCC report, right? So medium and then really, really bad, which is looking like where we're headed, right? The really, really bad. So it shows the habitable zone of the United States. And a lot of that was over the majority of the country for about 6,000 years that the study looked back at, embodied carbon in the land, blah, blah, blah. And if we get to a medium, like if we really do radical change right now and we achieve the medium outcome in terms of climate change, still that zone moves pretty significantly north and east. And in the likely outcome, which is the worst, it concentrates very specifically around the Northeast, almost prophetically around the places with the lowest real estate or the most depressed real estate markets with a ton of infrastructure, which is the Rust Belt and a lot of the cities that are built out, but just kind of vacant. And so for me, this thesis is an opportunity to come up with a secret evil plan to create some of these policies, this zoning, these zoning ideas, the cooperatives, the urban agriculture that is necessary to make these places the laboratories of liberation, so that when climate migrants lose their homes like they did in Paradise, or by the way, the federal government just committed to $25 million to resettle Native Americans on reservations that are being threatened by climate change. So where are those people going to go, right? Like everybody's got to go somewhere. And if you're paying even a little bit of attention, it's probably the Northeast. So how do we get there first? While rich people are still buying land in Tampa and in Phoenix, so that we can set the table for ourselves and don't end up in an Octavia Butler parable of the sour future, So that's that on that. And I will just say one last thing. So keep up with that, right? Come talk to me in 6 months. We'll have the plan. We can work on it together. But the other thing to, I think what Greg was saying about culture, there's this awesome indigenous artist and scholar who writes a lot about not keystone species, which are beings that keep a whole ecosystem together, like bees, for example. You pull bees out and the whole thing comes apart. Not keystone species, but keystone cultures, right? How do we change our culture to be so embedded in the ecosystem, such good stewards that it depends on us and we're good, right? We're in good relationships. So how do we create housing systems that embody those keystone cultures?
Totally. That is like spot on. Really appreciate it.
Please, yeah. Greg, did you have more to add, or that comment was also good to get?
Well, she raised her hand again, I think, before I did.
Oh, Marty, did you, are you all set or? Very good.
Oh.
Thank you.
Back on podium. Where's I gonna go with this? Yeah, I think there's like this very interesting situation that I think Alec is talking about, right? And we talked about it before, and I had no idea that you were doing research on Pawtuxet. And yeah, until I saw the slide, which is amazing. And it's like, it's so much more about how is the climate changing, right? And how do we adapt, right? Because what is currently native is not going to be native in 4 years. Southern Connecticut will be native in 4 years. And the area you're specifically talking about is suburb land, which is Ohio State, New York, Massachusetts, New England, whatever, Connecticut, Rhode Island. And 90% of the age growth was cut down between the 16th century and the 20th century. And so how do you regrow that in a way that is productive, right? And it's kind of what Colorado is struggling with. There's I had an amazing professor who went to GSD, blanking on his name, but he did GIS, and he specifically focuses on wineries and forest fires within California. And he's like one of the top people as far as knowledge of how forest fires spread within California. And it ends up being very similar as like, what are you planting? Why are you planting? And what's the effect, right? Because the planting styles that are happening on the West Coast are what are increasing the fires and allowing them to spread at the level that technically they really shouldn't. And so it's really interesting. And so anyways, I know we'll connect about certain stuff, and I'll pass his email on to you.
You have a reply. I mean, that ends the other comment we got to see about the encroaching onto that space, right? The human suppression of kind of a naturally occurring smaller scale fire, because we don't have the tolerance for that, and we've encroached upon those natural systems and planted our McMansions that are apparently still growing. Christopher, that's tragic to hear that we haven't been able to kind of cap our personal greed, but I could go on another diatribe about that. So let's have a couple more wrap up. This has been a great conversation. Greg, are you all set, or Alec? Go for it.
I just wanted to make a quick request of Chris, if you could share that great report that your firm worked on. The what was it? It was the collective living in great places. Just seemed pretty cool.
That's just like what we try to do. We did sponsor some research with UVA that kind of outlines 9 principles for healthy living, and I could certainly share that. But I think the report that I'm talking about was just it's a brochure that I put together. So it's just for this kind of event. If we were in person, I'd hand it out.
Oh, awesome.
Well, if you got the PDF, I'd love it.
Sure thing.
Beautiful. I see a couple emails in the chat. If folks are interested in being in touch, I'd be happy to circulate. But I do, if you are interested, please indicate so. I'm not imposing. This has been beautiful. I think it's been said a number of times that I really appreciate the breadth of thought and the kind of simultaneous sort of commonality and undercurrent that we've been hearing over, a very simple topic that we called housing, and folks are taking it in a lot of really fascinating, very thought-provoking directions. So thank you all for that and for sticking around to talk about it. And the question was, will these be circulated? We will have our recording posted to the BSA Housing Committee sub page of the architects.org website, so you can find it there. They get hosted on YouTube some indefinite time in the future, hopefully within the week or so. And I think with that, we can close it. Ganesh, do you have any closing remarks?
I mean, like on behalf of the housing committee, like Sarah and I, like, thank you all. It really makes it for like a much richer way to like wrap up the year. So we appreciate you all spending the time and being with us. So happy holidays and look forward to your future presentations. If you have other ideas you want to share, by all means, like reach out to either me or Sarah and we'll make it happen.
Absolutely. All right. Bye, folks. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thanks, everybody. Pleasure.
Great job, everyone. Thank you, Marty and Dariella, for coming.
Yes, thanks for coming.
Happy holidays, everybody.
Yes.
Get a lot of rest.
Thanks for the
Thanks a lot.
invite. Super insightful. Bye, guys.
Bye.